the importance of scientific papers and applications.
And I can't hear you, so can you,
okay.
I don't know if the microphone's...
Okay, now I think I can be heard. Yeah. The importance of scientific papers and the efficiency of charities and many different things differ by orders of magnitude. This seems to be a general thing. So how do you think we can actually find out the applications or technologies or the pieces of information that are really important and make them stand out against the competition of the less important things?
Okay, and then can we take the other couple of questions as well? Hold for the answers to that in your mind. I'll come back to you in a second on the panel. And this gentleman in the grey shirt there, and then further back.
My question is about existential risks. I like the sentence, each year the IQ, the necessary IQ to destroy the world is a little bit going down. And I think that there are three ways to diminish the risks. There is the relinquishment, the human enhancement, and democracy. So relinquishment, I think that almost nobody here is for this solution. It's to stop technological progresses is almost impossible. And also, to be short, if you try to stop technological progresses, the bad guys are not going to stop. Okay, so that's the first.
We need to have very quick questions.
Yeah, the second is human enhancement. We spoke already a lot about this. But the third solution for me is democracy. What do I mean by democracy? It means to convince the people in the street, to convince journalists, to convince politicians that there are really very important questions that, and people are at the moment not really interested by these questions, so that we have to convince them. And because if there is more research in concerning technological progresses, if there is more collective opinions about it, it will be better. So why is it? How is it possible to go further in this direction and to convince people?
Thank you. And just 2 rows behind, 3 rows behind.
Hi. My question's similar to the last one, so maybe we can sharpen this into something that the panel can discuss in some depth. Maybe I got a certain perverse pleasure from the structure of Nick's talk, because right at the start he touched on the issue, the whole situation with the gene synthesizers and the mousebox situation, and then we had a nice sort of philosophy discussion and science fiction discussion almost, which was required in order to recover from the horror of that point, which I think everybody with their brain switched on feels when they hear talk about the point about the gene synthesizers and the mousebox. And particularly for us, a sort of group who think about these things, and particularly a group which once upon a time was called...
Can I push you for the question? Sorry.
Okay, I think it could be fairly brief. We were once the World Transhumanist Association, which was a kind of a salon, but now we're an activist group, Humanityplus. So with seeing ourselves as activists, what really can we do? It's an absolutely critical point, I think. And if we've got energy and resources to devote to it, what mechanisms are there by which we can do something about that particular issue? It seems to me the most important issue for us to be thinking about. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the panel, starting with Aubrey and then working this way, to give considered answers to one or all of those questions. But I'd ask you to sort of keep to about 30 seconds to a minute if possible.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I mean, actually, I would say that Andrew's question is also quite... I'll try to I got the job. Andrew's question is also quite closely related to the other two. They've all got a lot in common, really. It's all about outreach and sense of proportion of importance of things, one way or another. And I think, at one level, I feel that it's an intrinsically impossible problem to solve significantly better than we're solving it already, because ultimately it's an education-based thing, it's a knowledge-based problem. On the other hand, there are plenty of ways in which politicians and people in the entertainment industry and so on succeed in changing the minds of people without educating them, and perhaps even by not educating them. So, perhaps we just need better training in these things. I mean, I've certainly never had any formal training in how to change people's minds, and maybe that's why I'm not very good at it. So, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of time for the idea that we ought to out actively expert advice on that?
Yeah, I will answer as chairman of Humanityplus. We are working on very specific actions together with Alex Lightman to make sure that the organization becomes less of a think tank and more of an action tank. This potentially does include to become even more of an activist organization. It does include marketing ourselves, does include descending a little bit from the ivory tower. I'm not a professional scientist, I'm not an academician. I would recommend those among us who are, that yes, just as Aubrey said, the skill of being able to sell your ideas in this idea and opportunity and distraction-rich world is essential to be heard and to be able to make an impact. We are in a room with a couple of hundred people. Next year we must be in a room with 2,000 people, otherwise we are not making progress.
Yes, I think we should lobby the major political parties in Europe, also the United States and of course China to get self-sustaining bases on the Moon and Mars. Doing that would dramatically reduce existential risks. This very much ties in with my own preoccupations about getting rid of suffering, because I think humans and post-humans are the only agents capable of abolishing suffering throughout the living world, and if it exists in other planets in that galaxy or local supercluster, we're the only agents who are likely to be able to get rid of it, and if we go extinct, no one else is going to do it.
It's a very difficult and complicated problem, and let me just pick up on a couple of different things. So one is the different strategies to getting people to pay attention, and there is a kind of, you can either go for trying to make as much noise as possible and attracting as much attention, and you might have more of an impact in that way, or you can take a quiet path and build up a lot of solid research and hope that in the long run that will influence the people who can really make a difference. It's not at all obvious which of those paths will lead us to where we need to get. Another big problem is that in many cases it's not even obvious what we are trying to achieve. We don't even know in many cases which direction we're trying to pull things in. So with DNA synthesis technology, do we want it to go faster or slower? Or the way it is going currently? It's very difficult to tell. Finally, the point there regarding the question about democratization versus relinquishment, etc. I think one is to disaggregate some of these policy options. So it's not a matter, should we relinquish all technology or should we push forward with all technology as fast as we can? You need to think about which specific technologies. Should we fund more, fund less, fund nothing at all, advocate against it? There is a whole spectrum of different policy options, and I think one needs to begin to look at the details in order to make headway.
Thank you. It seems to me that the voices of each person speaks from his or her own experience, and that the connective sensibility of the kind of theme, the overriding theme here, is the connectivity of knowledge and researching knowledge, knowing that we don't know the end result, but the point is to gain knowledge and to continue researching and asking questions. Pedagogy has been minus a transhumanist perspective for far too long, and there have been many professors who have worked within the university or the institutionalized systems to bring it about. Nick has, Max has, I have, Aubrey has. There's many of us who have, but within a small group. And I think that that is changing now. I've noticed that myself much more fluidly because of the time frame. Whereas maybe there was a cold winter of AI, but there's a really warm spring for AGI. Maybe there was a still period of stasis for thinking about extending human lifespan, dating back to Roy Walford, but it's become very important now in light of synthetic biology. So the time frame within which we discuss these issues makes a big difference. And if we put terms like existential risk in the foreground, I wonder what happens to existence risk, which is a term that I use, so I don't understand where the symbiosis is